So, I love this. And even though the movies aren't as quality as I think they could be, if you've not had the chance to see Atlas Shrugged, only 2 of the 3 movies have come out of the total book. Read the book if you can. Atlas Shrugged, amazing book. Because what's fascinating, this is exactly what's happening in our country right now. It's a huge book. So if you're a runner, I would recommend getting it on your iPad or your iPod, MP3, whatever they call it. But here's her quote: "You can avoid reality, but you cannot avoid the consequences of avoiding reality." This is reality, and nobody wants to teach people reality, right? Most financial advisors tell you exactly what you want to hear. Hang in, stay in. What's the motivation? That's their paycheck. We're not paid on how high your assets go. We're paid to protect your money from taxes, inflation, market risk, and economic uncertainty. And we're paid by the insurance company. You don't even pay us. You're going to see in the case studies that we'll go through in a moment, that's inside that under 1.5% cost. Now, how are you seeing things? How many see the older woman with what I've just flashed up as this figure right now? Show of hands, older woman. How many now, younger lady? How many see both? Now, some of you are like, no, there's not 2 up there. Golly, come on. That's below the line. Blame, shame, justification. Well, I didn't see it because there's a glare off of your glasses. Come on. Here we go. What is this? This is the cheekbone, right? The jaw bone, of the younger woman, her ear, the tip of her nose, and her eyelid. That's her profile looking that way. This is her hairline, and this is like a shawl. You see her? It's important that all of you see the younger, right? She's like this, guys. Right? She's a little more attractive, but you see her? Okay. What about the older woman? You see her? Yeah, she's looking right at me. This is her chin. This is her lip. That's her nose. That's her eye. You see her? Okay. We all understand and see in the individual retirement account. We know IRA. Do you know that IRA has only been around about half as long as an individual retirement account? It's only been around as long as an insurance retirement alternative. These strategies I'm teaching you today have been around far longer than IRAs and 401ks. It's just nobody ever took the time or paid the attention to seeing outside the box. It's always been here. Oh, there's the younger woman. She's right there. There's the other set of instructions, right? And it's too easy to just assume that something can't be, right? The surest form of ignorance is to form an opinion on a subject matter you haven't any knowledge. And you're getting knowledge, right? But here's the definition of knowledge. Knowledge is what we learn, right? Wisdom is the knowledge that we apply, right? So let's apply some of this. We can all see the same thing, and we can see it differently. Where are all these things? Chuck, you've talked about this wonderful thing. Let's get to it. All right, here they are. Retirement insurance contract. Here's the tax code, so if you want to write it down to research it. 101A allows the money in these contracts to go to whoever you say tax-free. Passes the death benefit tax-free. 72E is what allows us money, and be careful of all these guys out here selling this stuff now, right? The really cool thing about Paul you're going to hear from is that Allianz is who he represents. This is the annuity side. This is the whole life side of Allianz. Not whole life. This is Index Universal Life. The entire life side, play on words there, sorry. This is not whole life. They have forgotten more than the next 100 carriers know about this strategy, right? The 15 that have rolled out in the last number of months, they'll come to us and say, what do you think of this product, right? We have reps call us all the time. Hey, here's my product. What do you think? It wouldn't make the top 100 because of why? Innovators continue to innovate, and they innovate, and they innovate, and they never let the rest of the industry ever catch them. And it's not just a straight plug for Allianz. There's some great things about National Life that I'm going to teach you, right? But wow, be careful, because people will tell you that money inside of these contracts grows tax-free. That's not true. Technically, it grows tax-deferred. You'll know that they don't know when they tell you that it grows tax-free, because that's not true. It grows tax-deferred. What gets it out tax-free is Section 7702. That's the secret sauce to the whole game right there. And how would you guess that you're able to get money out of these contracts tax-free? By taking a loan, right? We've all taken loans before, likely in our lifetime. Maybe we used a home equity line to buy a car. Do we pay tax on that line of credit? No, we got to deduct tax on that line of credit, likely, on our Schedule A. So if we borrow money from the insurance company against our death benefit, when is the loan required to be paid back? When you die. Not in every contract. A lot of them require interest payments or principal and interest payments, not the proper designed retirement insurance contracts. There's about 5 to give you insight. Of the 994 out there, there's about 5. Great point. Yes and no. There's what's called a zero-wash loan. So technically, the IRS says if you loan money to your children, you and I are supposed to charge them interest. We're never going to see that interest back, but we're supposed to charge interest, right? Now, that being said, there's nothing in the code that says, well, there is something in the code that says you can't just give somebody money, right? There's what's called an AFR, applicable federal rate. It comes out every July, right? So the IRS governs this. Why? Because it creates, obviously, a tax revenue. So as a result of that, there's nothing in the code, however, that says that you can't charge somebody interest and then turn around and credit them back for that interest. Did you hear that? So you can charge it, and at the end of the contract year, retroactively go back and credit it. That's called a zero-wash loan. I have a whole training thing on our website on this, on the different types of loans, because I've had a few people ask this. Okay? So watch. Now there's what's called an index loan. That means that while you borrow the insurance company's money, not yours at net 0% rates, when you borrow the insurance company's money, they're going to charge you. But that's deducted from your death benefit. Right? So if they charge you 5%, and you borrowed $100,000 from your death benefit, then if you died that year, your family's not going to get $105,000. So it's a ledger that runs down, and you'll see this as I take you through the case study. So think about this. Everything we're discussing is a paradigm shift. It's how we see things on the spectrum here. Most of us have on our specter, oh, I thought insurance was where to get the most, you wanted to pay the least, right? That's called death insurance. I seriously don't know why they just didn't call it death insurance, right? And there's been cultures that it's an actual stigma that if you talked about death insurance, that you were going to die. And I joked Thursday, and I think I freaked some people out. I said, somebody will die. Not today, but somebody's going to die, right? So watch. That gets your attention again. Now, here's the other end of the spectrum where we are. What's the least I have to take for the most I can shelter and protect? That's the other end of the spectrum. That's how do you live your life insurance, right? That's so different than what most people understand. They'd say, well, we just presented at the CPA symposium at UCF. We were invited by a tax attorney group, and we had presented to this tax attorney group last February, a year ago February, and we asked the 6 senior partners, we said, what was your greatest insight? And they said, we had no idea that this was possible. All 6 answers. All veteran tax attorneys. Doesn't mean they're not highly intelligent on all other areas. They've forgotten more than I know on taxes, except on this one, right? Then we went and we presented to, there were about 300 in attendance, and we had some of them break out in our session, and we heard people, and we got feedback that said, I had no idea. I had one CPA come up to me afterwards. He goes, this is like a Roth IRA on steroids. You know, I mean, he immediately got it. But again, until somebody points it out, most people only know it for what everybody tells you that it is or what you assume that it was. So the personal protected pension plan is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through this, okay? And we're going to go real deep on numbers here right now, okay? And you're going to know more of the logistics of how the numbers move around so that you can get real clear on this, okay? And then Paul's going to come up and talk to you about how, because this case study is related to Allianz, he's going to talk to you about how the industry has really been able to break through some myths and barriers so that people really understand it, not just hearing it from me, right? Because I'm the advisor guy, you know, so that's why we wanted to bring carriers in so you could hear directly from them. But here's what you're going to see in this. This case study, which is a very common case study for us, is associated with how you get money out of your IRAs and 401ks without paying the tax out of your own physical pocket, not out of your wallet, okay? Very important. As a choice, here's a question for you. Would you rather pay the tax Or would you rather have the insurance company pay the tax from your death benefit that likely you didn't want to begin with? Not a hard question. The questions are going to become harder if that was a hard question, all right? So watch. Stop required minimum distributions. I get this all the time. Well, Chuck, I'm in my 70s. Does this make sense? Boy, does it ever if you've got money in IRAs and 401ks, because you're going to get clobbered. Watch the math. We ran this for somebody. This was on my radio show 2 weekends ago. $1 million in his IRA. Now think about this. $1 million. It's 70.5. The average required minimum distribution, does everybody know what that is? It's 70.5. By the following April, you've got to yank out a formula that the government dictates to you and I on these programs. These former 401ks have been rolled over to IRAs. If you don't take the RMD, abbreviating required minimum distribution, what is the penalty? 50%, right? Now, guess what the average RMD is going to be on $1 million? $50,000 a year. So you started with $1 million, and you got to take 50 out a year, right? And depending on what your tax rate is, obviously you're going to give up a sizable amount of that money. And depending on how long you live, you'll give more back in the tax, or actually, depending on how long you live, if you live to be 100, you'll pay, depending on where tax rates go, you could likely pay back as much or more than the amount that you started with, especially by the time the money transfers to your children, because it gets taxed then at their required minimum distribution level. Now think about that. You've heard this whole thing about stretching your IRA. Who's that benefiting? Yeah, you just stretch the annuity of taxation that you've been fortunate enough to be able to, because you worked hard, you did so well, you should pay some more tax. And then we should get it more from the next generation and the next generation. So watch, strategically roll out. I love this. Nobody wants to roll over. And you got in trouble in the mob if you rolled over, right? You're supposed to laugh at that one too. We're almost done, don't worry, okay? Don't roll over, roll out. So here's how we did it. Here's how a typical case design is for our firm. We find out what you're trying to accomplish after we understand what you have, what your taxes are, etc. So this is Mary. Mary said this, as nice as I can put it. Mary was not fond of the current administration. That's as far as I'll go on that one. And she said, Chuck, I don't think it's going to take 12 years for the cost of living to double. I want my design based on it doubling in 10. Now, does Mary have to wait 10 years to take her money out? No. We've designed plenty of cases for people to take their money out well before 10 years. This is her case study. Every case is customized to the individual and what they're trying to accomplish. So don't get hung up on the mechanics of Mary. Just get hung up on the understanding of how her mechanics work and how they may relate to you. So watch. This is important. This is about 72 pages of tax code I'm going to give you in about 3 minutes. Now, here were the amount of deposits. And you'd say, well, wait a second. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 times 100. Mary put in $500,000. Mary didn't come to us and say, here's 500 grand, make it work. Okay? We came to Mary and said, Mary, it's going to take 500 grand to make what it is you want to work at the time and the amount that you desire. And she said, okay, where do I take that money? I think I want it from my IRA. I said, I would agree with you from the IRA if you believe tax rates are going up. Does anyone not believe that tax rates are going up? Okay, good. Most of us are on the same page there, right? So she said, yeah, Chuck, I want to get the money out. Now, why did Mary not put in $500,000 up front? Taxes would have clobbered her in that one distribution, right? But also, if she put it in as a single deposit, the IRS will tax any money she takes out of it, just like she would be taxed on taking money out of an IRA or 401k. Why? Because they changed the rules in 1988. Here's what they said. Three tax citations. You can just write the abbreviations. TEFRA, T-E-F-R-E, or T-E-F-R-A, was formed in 82. DEFRA, D-E-F-R-A, was formed in 84. And TAMRA was formed in 1988. These were the 3 last changes to what I'm showing you in this special design that changed the rules. We joke and call these the evil sisters of the 80s. Okay? Now, here's all this meant. I came to Ray and I said, Ray, I got this great deal for you in 1980. I said, Ray, Carter's taken 1/3 to 40% of everything you're making on the CD, and I know you love the 15%, but you're only seeing 10 of it. And Ray says, well, what's your solution? And I said, well, hey, I work for this insurance company now, and here's what I can do. I can do a single deposit and take it from where you're getting a net 10 and move it over here and take your 100 grand, and I can put it right over here, and you only have to take like this little $10,000 death benefit, and I can pay you 14 tax-free from today on. And Ray really liked that idea, and so did millions of other people, right? So what did the IRS say? Because remember, they came out with this thing called an IRA or 401k about a half a decade before, and they said, wait a second, this is not fair. So who did they blame it on? They used the banks and the brokerages, and they said, well, you know, insurance industry, this is completely unfair because of all the tax advantages you have in your vehicle that we don't have in our vehicle. We think that we're not playing well together in the sandbox here. We got to figure this out. And the insurance company said, what do you have in mind? Well, we think that if Ray's going to move 100 grand, he should have to have at least $100,000 of death benefit. And the insurance company, who knew what they knew and knew that the others didn't know what they didn't know, said, okay. Now, what's been happening to medical and life expectancy advancement during this time? People are now starting to live a lot longer, right? So the same, almost the identical cost of the insurance is dropping at such a pace that if Ray now, in 84, because they attacked it again, that's when they changed it again, and now to get the same 100 grand in with a $100,000 minimum death benefit, there was almost the same cost as there was 5 years ago under the old mortality tables, as if you're trying to get 100 grand in and only have to take $10,000 of death benefit. Are you with me? Okay. Now, if you thought that was going to slow it down, it didn't slow it down at all because people are living longer and longer, and the cost of insurance is dropping and dropping and dropping, right? Because out of 1,000 people, 20 of them aren't dropping dead anymore. 2 are. 1 is. And so mortality is changing, right, as far as longevity. And as a result of that, the only way that banks and brokerages could compete, and the only way the IRS would be able to compete with you and I not taking money from their future tax coffers, was to come in and say, and watch this, hey, here's the deal. Our banking and brokerage clients think that there could be a run on the banks, and we don't want another Great Depression in this country, so it's unfair, since we are going to play completely below the line here, that you have something that we don't. So in order to compete, if you want your clients to be able to have all these tax advantages when they go to take this money out, they can't fund it as a single deposit anymore. They've got to spread that out. And the insurance company said, so what do you have in mind? Well, they said, I don't know, whole life requires 7 years. Can't get the full amount in within faster than 7 years. And the insurance company said, well, let us come up with the formula and we'll readdress this. We understand your concerns. And so the insurance company came back, watch this, and they said, here's what we've done. We're going to assume that there could be a plague or an epidemic, so we want the ability to kind of factor in, what if the cost of insurance went up 85%? And on top of that, you know, what if the market, especially with these fancy indexing strategies, what if the market for like 15 years didn't make any interest? So let's just guarantee these things like if they didn't do better than 2%. And I can picture, if that's the counsel for the attorney, the other 2 counselors in there for the banks and the brokerages are going, keep talking, keep going. This guy is a complete idiot. Yeah, that's what you want? And the insurance industry said, yeah, that's what we want. Now watch. You'll see how this plays out. So when we take money from her deposits to make sure we have all the tax benefits and roll them out, not over. You can't take money from a qualified to whom? The government, and put it into a non-qualified plan. Qualified to whom? You. Right? It's not pleasurable. Peeing in a cup and having blood drawn out of your arm is not pleasurable, because here's the little caveat: you do have to qualify for life insurance. That's the bummer of the whole deal. If you thought there was a way to get around that, I'm sorry, I should have just disappointed you early. But here's the good news. As long as just one of you is insurable, one of you doesn't have to be insurable. And here's the other good news to mind shift with you a moment. Traditional insurance is very cost prohibitive the less your health has supported you, right? So if you've had some medical health setbacks, you'd say, well, when's this thing cost prohibitive? I want to make sure you understand this very quickly. A 60-year-old female, to be able to put in $500,000, she's going to have to take a minimum death benefit of $1,441,000. Now, she's 61 here because they always round you to your next age. Okay, so she came to us at 60. It just shows you your next age. It doesn't take a year to get this done, but bear with me, okay? Now, as a result of that, if she came back as a 10-pack-a-day smoker, the minimum death benefit wouldn't be 1.4 to get the 500 in. the minimum death benefit may be $800,000. And as a design, which one can I get more money out of for the client? The smoker at $800,000 death benefit or the non-smoker at $1.4 million? I can get the same income for both. It's the one that had the lesser health is allowed to legally get away with lesser death benefit because they're table rated. You've heard of table ratings? So now we can look down that table, and that table's minimum death benefit only required $800,000. This is not one of those things where it's cost prohibitive because your health isn't an Olympic athlete status. Okay? We have plenty of clients that have had major, cancer 3 years ago. In fact, I would argue to say that's why likely you want some type of a unique design if you've had some medical health setbacks. That's kind of a grill in the room. I had one client say, well, gosh darn it, Chuck, I'm a table 8. Does this even make sense for me? It makes more sense for you than it does for the person who's not a table 8 because we now have to guard against you dying early. I mean, pardon the expression, but that's an added benefit to what you came in here looking for, right? So notice how we took the 25 out in a loan. So if we took out 100, watch, we didn't say, hey, Uncle Sam, if we owe you 25, let's take out 100, hold back 25, and put in 75. We haven't done that in years, especially with the advancement of what Paul's going to teach. So now we say, take out the 100, put in the 100, because you don't owe tax on it till when? Next year. Okay? And then let's borrow the tax from the death benefit and pay Uncle Sam back. So watch how it works. Clients will call in March. They'll call up Kirk on our team, who you would meet if we meet with you, and they'd say, hey, Kirk, this is Ray. That decision I made on getting my money out of the ticking tax time bomb cost me $17,760. Kirk calls up the carrier and says, hey, carrier, Ray needs $760. They cut Ray a check. There's no tax on the check. There's no reporting of the check. You don't turn it into your CPA on the check. You deposit the check, and when the tax bill's due to the IRS, you write the check. You don't have to qualify for all the reasons why you don't need the money before they loan it to you. You don't even have to tell the insurance company what you're using the money for. Use it for a cruise, pay tax. Your imagination is what you use the money for, okay? Now, watch. Accumulation value serves two purposes. It's the debit-credit column. Very important that you see this. If Mary is going to put in over time 500, and by the way, 100 is not the cap. We had somebody Thursday night said, I can't believe the IRS has limited this thing to 100 grand. I want to put way more than 100 grand in per year. This is Mary's example. We have clients putting several hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in this. We have clients putting $5,000 a year into this. All right? It's not a universal cap by the Internal Revenue Service. This is just her example, so I keep your attention here. But watch, if she puts in 100, the insurance company's on the hook the greatest the first year because it's going to take her 5 years to capitalize the account. True? So this is what the IRS will allow her to put in up to. Now, this should teach you something. The insurance company defines the minimum. The IRS dictates the maximum. And in Mary's case, this was the maximum, not universally. Okay? So if she doesn't want to put in 100 next year, as long as she puts in the minimum, let's say the minimum's 20. She can come back the third year and put in what she didn't put in the second year and put in her third year. Flexibility, key. Why? Most of our clients are business owners. There's good months, bad months, good quarters, bad quarters. Life is what it is, right? Flexibility. Now, if this is the first year, this is the grill in the room, so you see it, this is the cost. This is total transparency. Whole Life doesn't disclose costs and fees. We go over every one of them so you understand them. Accumulation value is minus the cost of the contract plus the interest that's being earned in the index. Debit, credit. It's most expensive the first year. Why? If Mary puts in 100 grand and dies that year, her beneficiaries are going to get a 1,400% rate of return. Now, Mary is not shooting for that return, right? Because Mary's not getting that return. That's the sad way. That's an amazing rate of return. Someone just hugged his wife. I like that. My wife and I joke about this all the time with the minimum amount of death benefit we each have in filling these contracts up since we were 25. We've got this kind of thing when we walk uptown. I always try to walk on the outside in case there's traffic, and if we're quarreling, I make it apparent by letting her walk on the outside. And we'll joke and say, she'll say to me, you're having me walk on the outside because you're not happy right now. I said, well, you figured that out, and I figured there'll be a lot of tax-free death benefit that kids and I will enjoy, right? Just kidding. There's Dateline episodes for that. This is not that. Now, the net cash value, so you're aware. These insurance companies that we're talking about today have been around for 117 to 165 years. In order to prohibit us from treating this like a money market, they're going to have a stiff surrender penalty during the 5 funding years. Why? Because you can't pay advisors, actuaries, and underwriters and buy option contracts and manage, a $50 billion, $80 billion companies if you got people going in and out of these things, right? And as a result of that, this one stands for 2 purposes. The first purpose is to prohibit you and I from cashing in all of our chips. So if we put in 100 grand, we're only going to get about 25 cents back on the dollar. And if it's designed right, and don't miss this, if we've really done our due diligence looking at a holistic approach to somebody's retirement future, we've carved out enough cash reserves that there should be zippo reason that someone would say, doggone it, Chuck, I've totally overcommitted to what I've thought I was going to put in here, and I just can't do it anymore. That's reckless. That's what's coming, unfortunately, in our industry when you can be 6 mouse clicks away from somebody showing you how to do this. So make sure they know what they're doing. The second purpose this serves is this column is the ledger that the insurance company has internally to know that you cannot borrow more than 90% of this number from this death benefit. So it's almost like their amortization schedule to protect somebody from just going hog wild on this thing, because this is not what it's about. This is the steady plotter, long-term deal. I would say look at this thing for at least 20 years or it's not for you. Because this isn't a cash monster accumulation deal. This is a cash distribution deal, okay? So that you don't run out of money before you run out of life. Now watch, in this case, there's no added tax impact to Mary's Social Security, because when we start triggering this 72 grand a year, again, it's coming from the death benefit, that's not deemed earned, passive, or portfolio income. And someone said to me, is this legal? Yes, it's legal. You're not reporting that to a tax return. It's a loan. Okay? It's a loan. That's why you could get it tax-free.
So you don't tell your CPA?
There's nothing to tell them. In fact, people's tax bill has gone down as a result of this. They got to figure out all the 1099s and 1099Rs and all the other stuff. I mean, you're welcome to tell the CPA, but I can tell you, you'll be telling him what he honestly or she doesn't know. We had one client said, I can't believe it. You were right. Not only did I ask my CPA to read and watch what you teach, and he wouldn't do that, I offered to pay him to do that. So here's my question. I said, what's that? He said, can you refer a CPA? That's why we do the continuing education for CPAs, is because we've met 2 in almost 20 years that understand this. Because here's what the CPA says but doesn't say it. You say to the CPA, hey, there's this guy, he's got this thing, and there's a way to grow the money tax-deferred and access it tax-free and transfer it tax-free, and you don't have to pay the loans back while you live. And all the CPA said was, I'm not familiar with that. And what you heard was, ooh, it must not be good. I can assure you, you're leaving here knowing more about this than your CPA. And that's not an insult to CPAs. I've got really good relationships with CPAs, but they'll be the first to tell you they didn't know what they didn't know. They did not understand this until somebody pointed it out to them, right? They saw the older woman. They didn't see the younger lady. This is not grandma's insurance anymore. And too many of them kind of got sold on the whole life people coming there saying, hey, you should refer all your people to me and we can put them into this and this, this, and this. It's different. Times have changed. So it's like an office building. If you came to me, Colleen, and said, hey, I got this opportunity in Volusia County to buy this 5-story office building, I'd say, is there any city ordinance restrictions? Yeah, there's one. What's that? Can't fill more than 1 floor up per year. Okay, well, what's that look like? Well, the good news is because of all my clients, and Colleen's big time into media, so this is who you want to see if you want to get into media, and she said, I've got media clients that'll fill every floor. I'd say, wow, that's a really good strategy then, because watch, we can fill it up year 1, 2, 3. Now we have more cash flow coming in than we have going out, and now we start making money. That's how this works. It's like capitalizing anything in our lives, right? Real estate included. But let's say that Colleen says, doggone it, I hate the tenant on the 5th floor. Let's just bulldoze the 5th floor, right? Now, you can't do that in real estate, but you can do that in what I'm teaching you. You could say, you know what, I thought I was going to put in 100 a year for 5, as an example. I'm only going to put in 400 for 4, or 100 times 4 for 400. I'm not going to put the last 20% in. That's okay. It's not ideal, but we can call the carrier and say, over time, how can we drop that death benefit minimum down 20% so retroactively we back into what you ended up funding and not having you overpay for the minimum death benefit. Does that make sense? Okay, let's flash forward. Someone was talking about legacy. This is probably one of my favorite parts. Now, again, it's tough to go from lifestyle to legacy when we're just obviously all wanting to live, right? Legacy is a big deal, and we've got a really neat case. I wish he could have been here. He's traveling with his grandkids, which is pretty cool, for like the next 6 months. Grand Canyon, the whole 9 yards. And he said to me, and I got to give him credit for this, he said, I want to make sure I understand. He said, I know you don't close out early or you close out late. Why, again, not late? I said, well, George, here's what happens. If over time, now notice we bumped the income up because the cost of living we projected to go up for Mary. So we went from 72 to 84 to 96. Again, it's not required. It's not like some militant formula from our IRS that's saying you have to do this. It's at your choice, provided you have the accessibility to do it. And let's say over that 30 years we took an income, because in Mary's case we deferred for 10 years, that we've taken out, and I'm just going to round it, $2.5 million. Okay, are you with me? Our basis was 500. So we're up about 2 million tax-free. And the death benefit now, let's go here. Let's say the death benefit's about $1 million, and this is always your walk-away column too. So if you just want your cash, although I wouldn't advise it, let's say George came in and he said, Chuck, it's been a good run, cash me out, close it out. I'd say, George, here's why you don't want to do that. He said, well, remind me again why. I said, well, if you've taken out 2.5 and we send you another $1 million, your economic benefit is 3.5. Are you with me? Now, even though I know it took 30 years to get the 2.5, that year you close this out, this contract, and shut it down, the IRS, minus your basis from the 3.5, being 500, is going to treat it that year as if you made $3 million as taxable income. He said, now I understand why I don't want to shut it down. And I said, yeah, and how do you do that? You leave something in the death benefit. As long as you die with a death benefit, there's not something that's going to trigger an unnecessary tax. Okay? But here's what he said that I don't want you to miss. He said, okay, I get it. Then how about this? If I've got $2.5 million over here from other assets I've inherited or things our family sold, or maybe I did really well with real estate, and I'm dying, or I don't project having many more years on this earth, how's the IRS treat loan payoffs? And I said, well, if you have a death benefit, and I'm making these numbers up, of about $2 million, and you paid back $2.5 million, your death benefit would go to $4.5 million. He said, well, here's what I like about that. He said, I don't know how the estate tax is going to be treated on this other $2.5 million, but what I do know with the way of this being designed properly, especially being designed in an irrevocable life insurance trust, I know that if I come in and pay off that $2.5 million loan, my death benefit that's going to transfer to my children, my church, and my charities is going to transfer completely tax-free. And he said, and what I like about it is if I defy the odds and there's some medical advancement to cure my ailment, I could come in and take out the $2.5 million the next month? And the answer is yes. So think of it not just in lifestyle, but think about how you can regulate legacy as a result of you using the advancement of these life insurance laws, which, by the way, and the magic question is going to come, how long is the IRS going to allow this? You'll get that answer. Watch the difference. We're earning interest now on an arbitrary number. Do you see the compounding effect? Remember the rule of 72s? So if we're earning, let's say, 8%, every 9 years, this thing's doubling. And we're earning the indexing on this column. Now think about it. In any other investment vehicle, if we're yanking out, let's say, 100 grand and we have 500 grand, how much of our money is going to earn interest the next year? We had 500, we pulled out 400, or we pulled out 100 from the 500, only 400 is going to earn. That's not how this vehicle works. See, we didn't take money from our accumulation value. We borrowed it from the death benefit of the insurance company, and people look at this and say, well, why is the death benefit going up? Because you didn't take enough out. Take more out. I have one client that says, well, that's great, George's example's fine, but I want to leave $1. Leave $1. That's probably stretching it. You may have to leave maybe $100,000 of death benefit, but you can choose by being able to borrow up to 90% of this column how you manage this account. And that's a big part of our clients taking distribution. Not only do we talk about what crediting strategy makes sense for them for the next 12 months, but what are we doing about tax mitigation? What are we doing about helping grandchildren? One client said, what I like about it is whatever I can take out above what I need, Can't I start another retirement insurance contract for my grandchildren with that? And you can.